In a world where power is born into the blood, where 80% of humanity carries a quirk, and heroes are ranked, licensed, worshipped, a world that just watched its greatest symbol burn out his last ember. All might is finished, the pillar is gone, and in the silence he left behind, something is coming. But tonight, a different kind of power steps through a door that should not exist. Not a quirk, not born, earned, in agony, across 10,000 deaths, in dimensions this universe has no name for. He has seen the end of infinities. He has bargained with gods and won. And when the Sorcerer Supreme opens his eyes in a city of heroes, he will see the war that no hero can yet imagine, and he will have to decide how much of himself he is willing to spend to stop it. What if Doctor Strange entered My Hero Academia, written by me, and you decide who crosses over next? Any universe, any character. Name the world, name the hero or the monster, drop it in the comments, and it could be the next story that tears the multiverse open. Now, hold your breath. The door is opening. Reika Tanabe had worked the night shift long enough to think nothing could surprise her anymore. 11 years in the emergency ward of Musutafu General, she had seen a man walk in with his arm turned to solid glass by a rogue quirk and apologize for the inconvenience. She had watched a child cough butterflies and a heart patient stabilize himself by lowering his own body temperature to just above freezing. In a city like this, in a country like this, the impossible clocked in every night alongside her. You learned to hand it a clipboard and keep moving. So when she stepped out into the ambulance bay at 3 in the morning for the cigarette she wasn't supposed to smoke, and the air in the far corner of the lot began to spark, her first, tired thought was simply, another one. Then, the sparks turned in a circle, not scattered, the way an emitter quirk threw them. They wheeled around a single point in the dark like filings finding a magnet, orange and gold, drawing a ring in the empty air a full story tall. The ring caught fire at its edge and did not spread. Inside it, the parking lot was gone. Reika could see through the burning circle, but not to the loading dock behind it. She saw somewhere else, a sky the color of a bruise, a landscape of geometry that hurt to look at, folding into itself like the inside of a shell. The cigarette slid out of her fingers. A man stepped through the fire. He was tall and precise, dressed in blue robes that belonged to no century she knew, a red cloak pouring off his shoulders, and the cloak moved, not with the wind, with intent. Its high collar turned like a head turning, its hem lifted and settled as though it were tasting the air on his behalf. At his throat, a round golden amulet hung closed like a sleeping eye. The ring of fire snapped shut behind him, and the parking lot was just a parking lot again, dark and wet and ordinary, except for the impossible man standing in the middle of it. For one long second, the two of them looked at each other across the asphalt, the tired nurse and the sorcerer. Then his gaze slid past her, up and out, over the rooftops and the sleeping city and the smog orange sky, and every muscle in his sharp face went still, with something Reika could only later describe as dread. Reika did the sensible thing. She went back inside, and she called it in, and she did not smoke again for a month. Stephen Strange had crossed a great many thresholds in his life. Most of them had tried to kill him. This one had simply set him down in a city, on a wet street, under a sky, and left him with the overwhelming and immediate certainty that he had come much, much too far. He stood in the empty lot and let his senses widen, the trained, deliberate broadening of perception that had taken him years on a mountain to learn and a lifetime of arrogance to earn. He reached out for the thing every sorcerer reaches for first, the way a swimmer reaches for the bottom with a toe, the ambient magic of the world, the background hum, the dimensional energies that soaked every reality he had ever walked, the raw stuff a master of the mystic arts drew breath from and spun into spells. It wasn't there, not depleted, not hidden, absent, in the way a color can be absent from a spectrum, a whole register of the universe simply missing, as if this reality had been built by hands that never learned the language. He drew on his own reserves, and the sling ring answered. The eye at his throat stirred. The cloak held him. His power was his, portable, intact, carried across like water in a flask. But there was no well here to refill it from. A sorcerer in this world would be a man holding his breath. However long he stayed, he was spending down a fixed account, and no more would ever come. That alone would have told him to leave. It was the second thing that made him stay, because underneath the missing hum, drowning it out, screaming across the whole width of the city like a struck bell that would not stop ringing, was the anomaly he had come to find. He had first felt it in the sanctum, days ago and a universe away. A wrongness plucking at the multiversal wards, faint but insistent. A soul signature that should not exist. Not one soul. Many, layered, threaded together through time in a chain that ran backward through the dead. Power passed hand to hand across generations, not by blood, not by teaching, but by inheritance of the self. A fragment of a living will surviving its own death, to lodge in the next carrier, and the next, gathering the echoes of everyone it had ever been. To Strange's trained sight it read like a soul that refused to end. Necromancy, almost. Reincarnation, almost. Something with no clean word for it. Something that broke rules he had spent his life defending. And running beneath it, its mirror, its shadow, a second signature. Older, vast, a hunger given shape. A thing that took what others were born with, and hoarded it in a single body across a span of time no mortal frame should hold. If the first anomaly was a soul that would not die, the second was a soul that ate other souls' inheritances and called it strength. Two of them, woven together like the light and dark of the same terrible braid. Strange had crossed over expecting a rogue artifact, a dabbling cult, a tear that needed stitching. He had found instead an entire world built on a single impossible premise, that power could simply arrive in a body, unearned, at birth. And at its heart, these two soul anomalies, one radiant and one ravenous, orbiting each other in a slow collision that had not finished yet. He turned in a slow circle, reading the city's future the only way he safely could without the eye, not looking through time, only listening to the pressure of it, the way an old sailor reads a barometer he cannot see. The pressure was terrible. Something was coming to this place. He could feel it, the way you feel a held note before it breaks. The fracture lines already there, the fall already begun. The whole gleaming edifice of this hero-worshipping world, leaning a fraction of a degree past its center of gravity, and not yet knowing it. The great protector was already gone. He could taste the fresh grief of it in the air, a wound the size of a nation. And into that wound, the ravenous signature was patient, and the braid was tightening, and somewhere in this city, a boy carried the whole radiant chain of the dead, inside a body far too young to survive what was coming for it. Strange closed his eyes. "Not my world," said the cold, disciplined voice that had kept him alive through Dormammu and the dark dimension and 14,605,000 deaths. "Not my fight. Seal the tear from your own side. Go home. Every hour here you burn power you cannot replace, chasing a catastrophe in a universe with its own defenders." It was good advice. It was the advice he'd have given anyone else. Then a helicopter crested the rooftops with a searchlight, and a voice through a loudspeaker in a language his sling ring quietly translated into his skull told him to lower himself to the ground and identify his quirk registration, and Stephen Strange sighed the particular sigh of a man who already knew he was going to make the wrong choice for the right reasons. He rose off the asphalt instead. The cloak lifted him smoothly into the light, robes settling, and the sorcerer floated there 15 feet above a Musutafu parking lot, lit up like a saint in a searchlight, and let the professionals get their first good look at the problem. The professionals arrived faster than he expected. This world, whatever else was wrong with it, had reflexes. The first hero came down out of the dark on a swirl of crimson feathers, landing on the hospital's edge with an easy, boneless grace, and a lazy raised hand, wings folding at his back. Young, blonde, an unlit cigarette of a smile on his face, and eyes that missed nothing behind a yellow visor. He said something light and friendly and full of teeth, the practiced patter of a man trained to keep a scene calm, and Strange understood perhaps one word in 3 and all of the tension underneath. The second arrival did not bother with patter. He came out of a side street on foot, unhurried, a gaunt figure in black with a gray scarf coiled living around his throat, and the moment his bloodshot eyes fixed on Strange, the sorcerer felt something reach for him, a canceling force, a hand, closing around the thing that made him what he was, trying to switch it off, the way you'd snuff a candle between 2 wet fingers. Strange felt the man's quirk find him. He felt it fail. There was nothing to snuff. The gaunt hero's power was made to erase quirks, the born-in factors of this world, the emitter lines and mutation genes that gave these people their strange gifts. It swept over Strange looking for that switch, that biological signature, and found instead a man whose power was not in his cells at all. Not a quirk. Never a quirk. A discipline learned in a mountain temple across the void, carried in the will and the training and the 10,000 hours, backed by artifacts that answered to him and not to his blood. Erasure passed through it like a hand through smoke. Strange watched the realization cross the gaunt man's tired face, the small, precise flicker of a professional, discovering that his signature move, the one that hard-countered every powered threat this world had ever produced, had done nothing at all. The man's floating hair settled, the red glow in his eyes guttered out. He stared up at the sorcerer with the wary, recalculating stillness of someone who has just learned the ground is not where he left it. "You're looking for a quirk to cancel," Strange said, and the sling ring's translation carried his voice down to them, dry and calm and unhurried. "You won't find one." The cloak stirred at his shoulders. "I don't have one. What I have is considerably older and considerably more difficult, and I did not come here to fight either of you." He let that settle over the wet lot, the searchlight, the winged hero's frozen smile, the erasure hero's narrowing eyes. "I came," said the Sorcerer Supreme, "because your world is about to end, and I appear to be the only person currently standing in it who can see how." They did not attack him. That, more than anything, told Strange what kind of world he had walked into. A cruder society would have opened fire on the floating stranger the instant the erasure trick failed. This one held. The winged hero on the rooftop kept his easy posture and his easy smile, but a single crimson feather had drifted loose from his wing and was riding the air 10 feet to Strange's left, drawing a slow, patient circle, and Strange understood it for what it was, a blade waiting to be told to be a blade. The gaunt man in black had not moved either, but 3 more shapes had resolved out of the dark at the edges of the lot, keeping their distance, keeping their angles. They were not panicking. They were positioning. Professionals. A whole apparatus of them, trained to arrive, assess, contain, and never once let the public see them sweat. It was, Strange thought, genuinely impressive. It was also entirely inadequate to what was coming, and none of them knew it yet. "My name is Stephen Strange," he said, keeping his hands open and visible, the cloak holding him steady in the light. "I'm not from your country. I'm not, strictly speaking, from your world. And before you spend the next several hours trying to work out how to put me in a cell, I'd like to save us all the time. You can't. Not with anything you have. I say that as a statement of fact, not a threat." The winged hero's voice came back light and pleasant, and the ring translated it into Strange's skull, a half-beat behind the lips. Something about how that was exactly the sort of thing a person said right before things got messy, and how about they all come down to the ground and talk it through like civilized people, and did the stranger have a name for his quirk they could put on the paperwork? Because there was always paperwork. "It isn't a quirk," Strange said. "Your colleague already tried to switch it off. It's called magic. I understand how that sounds." He did understand how it sounded. He'd have arrested himself. The gaunt man spoke for the first time, low, flat, exhausted, every word rationed. Strange caught the shape of it. "Prove it, without hurting anyone, and do it slowly." "Fair enough." Strange raised one scarred hand and turned it palm up, and let a small mandala of orange light unfurl above it, a spinning wheel of geometry, complex and precise, sparks trailing off its rim into the wet night air. He did nothing with it. He simply held it there, a lantern with no purpose but to be seen, and let them look at the thing their instruments would never be able to name. The circling feather slowed. On the rooftop, the winged hero's smile changed. Still a smile, but the humor had gone out from under it, replaced by the flat calculation of a man revising a threat estimate upward and not liking the new number. "Erasure looks for a quirk factor to cancel," Strange said, nodding once at the gaunt hero without breaking the light. "There is no factor. There's a discipline, and there are objects that obey the discipline. Your power is beautifully specific, and it is aimed at a category I don't belong to. I don't say that to insult you. I say it because in about an hour you're going to wish you had a hard counter for me, and you need to understand now that you don't, so that we can skip the part where you find out the hard way and start on the part that actually matters." He closed his hand. The mandala winked out. "Someone is coming who outranks all of you," he said. "Bring them." I'll only say the rest once. The one who came was fire. Strange felt him before he saw him. A rising heat shimmer down the length of the street, the puddles beginning to steam, and then the man himself rounded the corner, and the whole lot lit up blue-white. Tall past the point of comfort, broad as a doorway, crimson-haired and crimson-bearded, with the beard itself burning, a living furnace in a navy costume, blue eyes like the hottest part of a flame set in a hard, scarred face. The other heroes shifted at his arrival, not away from him exactly, but into the particular alertness of subordinates around a superior they respect and don't entirely like. The winged one straightened off his lazy lean. The gaunt one gave the smallest nod. The number one hero looked up at the floating sorcerer, and the heat coming off him was a physical pressure Strange could feel on his face from 30 feet up. And when he spoke, his voice was a low furnace rumble, the ring rendered without softening any of its edge. He did not ask about quirks. He did not ask about paperwork. He asked, in effect, whether Strange was a threat to the people in the hospital behind him, because that was the only question that mattered, and everything else was noise. Strange found he respected that. No, he said, I'm a threat to whoever is planning to burn this world down, and I'm here to find out who that is before they finish. The people in that hospital are the reason I haven't already gone home. He let the cloak lower him, slowly, deliberately, until his boots touched the wet asphalt and he stood among them at eye level, a gesture, and they knew it. A man setting down a card he didn't have to. You're the strongest person in this city, possibly this country. I can feel it, which means when I tell you what I've come to tell you, you're the one who has to decide whether to believe me. The furnace-eyed man studied him. The heat dialed back a fraction. Not trust, but the willingness to listen, which from a man like this was a considerable concession. He said something short, talk, and Strange, standing in a parking lot in a world with no magic to breathe, told the number one hero of My Hero Academia the truth. He told them about the 2 soul signatures. He did not use the word soul first. He tried energy signature, metaphysical pattern, the vocabulary of instruments, because he had learned across 1,000 worlds that men of action distrust mysticism until it's too late to distrust it. He told them there was a power in their world that passed from person to person through death itself, gathering the wills of everyone who had carried it, a chain running backward through the generations, radiant, growing, and that its light was fixed, at this moment, on someone young, someone in this city. He watched the fire hero's face when he said it, and he watched the winged heroes, and he saw the thing he'd half expected. They knew, not the whole of it, not the metaphysics, but something in the description landed on a nerve they already had, a flicker between the two of them, a glance not quite exchanged, the particular stillness of people hearing a stranger describe a secret they'd been sworn to keep. The gaunt hero's expression did not change at all, which told Strange the most of anyone's. One for all, he thought, so it has a name here, and you 3 are standing on top of it. And the other one, Strange went on, quieter now, because this was the part that had crossed the void with him, the part that had made him stay. Its mirror, older, vast, a thing that does not inherit power through death. It takes it, from the living, and hoards it in one body across far more years than a body should hold. If the first pattern is a soul that refuses to end, the second is a soul that eats what others were born with. And they are braided together. They have been circling each other in your world for a very long time, and the circle is closing, and the man who carries the second pattern, he stopped, because the fire hero's face had changed. The heat had guttered, not flared, guttered, drawn inward, and under the hard, scarred features, Strange saw something he had not expected to see on the strongest man in the country. He saw fear, old fear, buried deep, the kind a person builds an entire life on top of, and never speaks aloud. The kind that has a name. The number one hero said a name, very low. The ring did not translate it, because it was a name, and it came out of the man's mouth like something dragged up from the bottom of a well. All for one. The temperature in the lot dropped as if someone had opened a door onto winter. He's imprisoned, the winged hero said quickly, too quickly, and the ring caught the strain under the lightness for the first time. deep beneath the city, chained, monitored, sealed away after the last war, after the symbol of peace spent the final of his power to put him there, contained, handled. Yes, Strange said. I can feel the walls around him. They're very good walls. He looked from face to face, and let the next words land with all the weight he'd carried them across the void to deliver. They're also not the problem. A power like his doesn't keep itself in one body for that long by accident. It plans. It seeds. The second pattern I'm reading isn't only in your prison. There's a thread of it running loose in this city right now. Younger, growing, being cultivated somewhere I can't yet pin down, in a body that isn't finished becoming what it's meant to be. Your prisoner made a copy of himself. An heir. And the heir is where the braid is tightening. That's what's coming. That's the thing your instruments can't see, and your erasure can't cancel, and your fire can't reach. Because it isn't done yet, and by the time it's done, it will be too late for all of you. Silence in the lot. The searchlight hummed. Somewhere far off a train ran. The fire hero stared at him with those furnace eyes, and Strange watched the man do the terrible arithmetic, weigh a stranger who fell through a burning circle against a fear he'd carried his whole career, and find that the two of them fit together too well to dismiss. You could be lying, the winged hero said. Not hostile, just true. I could be, Strange agreed. You have a hero whose entire power is built to see through exactly that kind of thing. He didn't know it was true. He suspected. This world was built for hard counters. There would be a lie detector quirk somewhere in the roster, and the odds were decent. One of these three had worked beside it. He was gambling, and he let none of it show. Use whatever you have. Test me however you like. I'll wait. I have, unfortunately, nowhere else to be. They tested him. It took the rest of the night and most of the next day, in a gray concrete room, in a hero agency building, with reinforced walls that meant nothing to a man who could fold space, which he pointedly did not do, because the entire point was to be believed, and you do not earn belief by demonstrating you could leave whenever you liked. They brought people. A woman whose quirk, the ring gathered, let her feel the shape of a lie like a wrong note in a song, and who listened to Strange talk for an hour, and came away pale and quiet, and unable to catch him in a single one. A support scientist with a scanner that read quirk factors and found, in Strange, a flat and impossible nothing. A man with no quirk, who was manifestly not powerless. A category the machine had no slot for. A telepath they'd flown in who touched the surface of his mind and recoiled from the memory of a green-skinned world, folding in on itself 14 million times, and would not go back in. Every test that could catch a fraud caught nothing. Every category they had, he fell outside of. And slowly, grindingly, the way a large ship changes heading, the apparatus around him shifted from contain the anomaly to what does the anomaly know. It was the fire hero who broke first, because he was the one carrying the oldest fear. He came alone, near the end, into the gray room, and shut the door, and stood there radiating his low, constant heat, and asked Strange the real question. Not, are you lying? They were past that. He asked whether the boy could be saved. He didn't say which boy. He didn't have to. Strange had felt the man flinch every time the radiant chain came up, had watched him place himself, without seeming to, between the stranger and the direction of a certain UA dormitory, and had understood that the #1 hero of this world was standing guard over the exact soul Strange had crossed the void to find. I don't know, Strange said. He had learned, across all those deaths, the specific weight of that sentence, and he did not cheapen it. I don't lie about what I can see. The chain is fixed on him. The braid is tightening around him. Everything that's coming is coming toward that boy. And there is a version of the future, many versions, where it takes him and uses him, and your world falls in the taking. He met the furnace eyes and held them, but I've made a habit of standing in doorways that everyone tells me are already closed. That's the whole of my talent, if you want to know. I lose and lose and lose, and then once, I find the single thread where we don't. I can't promise you that thread exists here. A breath. I can promise you I won't leave until I've looked for it. And I burn a little more of myself with every hour I stay looking, in a world that gives me nothing back. So, When you decide to trust me, and you will, because you already do, decide fast. I'm on a clock I can't wind." The fire hero looked at him for a long, long moment. Then he reached up and touched a communicator at his collar and said something short into it, and the ring translated it a half-beat late, and it was an address and a time, and one more word Strange didn't know but understood completely from the way the big man's jaw set as he said it. The word was a name, a person, someone Strange needed to meet. "There's a man," the fire hero said, low, "who used to hold what your boy holds now, who spent it all putting your second pattern behind those walls you admire." The heat around him banked down to almost nothing, which Strange had learned was this man at his most serious. If anyone alive can tell you whether the copy is real, it's him. And that was how Stephen Strange, master of the mystic arts, Sorcerer Supreme of a universe half a multiverse away, came to be standing the next evening in a small, quiet apartment that smelled of instant coffee and old bandages, across a low table from a gaunt, hollow-cheeked skeleton of a man with 2 frayed forelocks of blonde hair and sunken blue eyes that had once been the brightest hope of an entire world. And to feel, the instant the frail man looked up at him, the faint, dying afterglow of the radiant chain still clinging to him like the warmth of a fire long since gone out. You held it too, Strange thought, with a slow, cold understanding. You carried the light before the boy did, which means you know exactly what I'm about to say, and you're going to tell me I'm right. The frail man smiled, a wrecked, kind, terrible smile, and gestured to the empty cushion across the table, and in careful English, the ring didn't need to translate, said, "You're the one who's seen it coming. Sit down, doctor. I've been waiting a long time for someone to finally see it too." The apartment was small in the way that a monk's cell is small. Not poor exactly, but stripped, as though the man who lived here had been slowly setting down the weight of his own life one object at a time, and had not much left to put down. A kettle ticked on a hot plate. A single framed photograph faced the wall. On the low table between them sat 2 cups of instant coffee going cold, and across that table, the former symbol of peace, folded his skeletal hands and told Stephen Strange everything. He told it plainly, which Strange had not expected. He'd braced for evasion, for the careful half-truths of a man guarding a nation's deepest secret. Instead, the frail man spoke like someone who had carried a stone up a mountain his whole life, and was, at last, grateful to hand a piece of it to someone strong enough to hold it. He told Strange about One for All, that the radiant chain had a name, and a shape, and a purpose. That it was a quirk, yes, but not only a quirk. That it had been passed down deliberately across generations, each holder pouring their own strength into it before they died, and handing it on, so that it grew, so that the will of every previous wielder survived inside the power itself. 7 of them, before the boy, their embers still burning in the current fire. "So you feel them," the frail man said, watching Strange's face. "The ones who came before. When you look at the boy, that's what you've been reading. A soul that refuses to end," Strange said quietly. "I called it that before I had the word for it. I stand by the description." And then All Might, for that, Strange had gathered by now, was who this ruin of a man had been, the great pillar the whole city was still grieving, told him about the other thing, the mirror, and here the plainness cracked, just slightly, because this was the wound under all the others. All for one, the brother power, the one that took instead of gave, that stripped quirks from the living and hoarded them across more than a century in a single unaging frame, that had been the shadow behind every catastrophe this world had suffered for generations. The frail man told Strange how he had spent the last true measure of his own strength, the final ember of One for All, burning down to nothing in his fists, to put that ancient hunger behind the deepest walls the country could build. "And I felt it end," All Might said. "I felt him contained. I told myself it was finished." The sunken eyes came up. "You're going to tell me it isn't. You already know it isn't," Strange said. "That's why you were waiting for me." The frail man was quiet for a moment. Then he nodded, once, and the last of the performance went out of him, and what was left was just a very tired, very brave man in an empty room. There were always rumors, he said. A doctor who worked for him, experiments. The idea that a man like that would never trust his life's work to a body that could die. His hands tightened. A vessel, an heir, something he'd been growing in the dark for years, ready to receive everything he was, so that even locked away, even contained, he would simply continue in someone new, someone young. He looked at Strange with a dawning, dreadful hope, the terrible hope of a man who wants very badly to be told his nightmare is only a nightmare. We never found proof. We looked. We couldn't find it. You couldn't find it, Strange said gently, because it isn't a quirk, and it isn't a person yet, and your instruments read quirks and people. It's a pattern, a soul being overwritten a little at a time, in a place shielded well enough that even I can only feel the edge of it. He set his cold coffee down, untouched. I'm sorry, it's real. The copy is real. I've felt it breathing in this city since the moment I arrived. Your prisoner made himself an heir, and the heir is nearly ready. And when the two of them finish becoming one thing, he spread his scarred hands. Your walls won't matter, because the man you sealed away will simply be walking around outside them, in a new body, holding everything he held before, and hunting the exact light your boy carries. The kettle ticked. Somewhere below the window, a city that did not know it was dying, went on with its evening. All Might closed his eyes. When he opened them, the hope was gone, and something harder had replaced it. Not despair. Resolve. The specific resolve of a man who has already given everything once, and has just discovered there is more to give. Then you need to meet him, he said. The boy. Before you do anything else. Because whatever you're planning, whatever you can see, it doesn't happen to him. It happens with him, or not at all. I won't let it be otherwise. A ghost of the old thunder moved under the frail voice. That's the one thing I have left to be stubborn about. Strange looked at the ruined symbol across the cold coffee, and the framed photograph turned to the wall, and felt something he did not feel often, in any universe. He felt outmatched in the way that mattered. All right, he said, take me to him. The boy was 15, maybe 16, green-haired, freckled, with wide, earnest eyes, and the coiled spring nervousness of someone who has not yet grown into a strength that is already far too large for him. He had scars on his hands, old burns, Strange thought at first, until he looked closer and understood they were the marks of a power breaking its own vessel from the inside, a body being asked to hold more than it was built for, and paying the price in ruined fingers. He stood in the doorway of the small UA dormitory room and looked at the impossible man in the red cloak with an expression that was mostly fear, and underneath it, something Strange had not braced for. Curiosity. Open, unguarded, aching curiosity. The boy was afraid, and he wanted to understand anyway. He looked at the cloak of levitation shifting on Strange's shoulders and the closed golden eye at his throat, and Strange watched him want to know, the way a certain kind of person always wants to know, right up to the edge of the thing that could kill them. Oh, Strange thought, with a small interior lurch he did not let reach his face. You're the kind that runs toward it. Of course you are. The chain wouldn't have chosen anything less. All Might made the introductions, one careful hand on the boy's shoulder, and the boy, Midoriya, the ring caught, Izuku Midoriya, bowed too deeply and apologized for nothing, and then, unable to help himself, blurted a question about the sparks. What were they? How did they work? Was it an emitter type? Was it stored? Did it have a range? Did it cost him anything? The questions tumbling out in a rush of analytical hunger that reminded Strange, with an unwelcome pang, of a younger version of himself, before the crash, before the mountain, when the only thing he'd ever wanted was to understand exactly how a thing worked, so he could be the best in the world at doing it. It cost me a great deal, Strange said, and meant it more than the boy could know. Everything costs something. You of all people should already understand that. The boy's hand, the scarred one, closed a little, and his eyes went to it, and something passed over his young face that was far too old for it. They talked. Strange had not planned to like him, and did anyway, which was inconvenient. The boy listened to the whole terrible shape of it, the copy, the air, the braid tightening, and did not flinch from it, and did not collapse under it. He asked, "What do we do?" Not "Why me?" Not "Is it hopeless?" What do we do? And Strange, who had stood in 10,000 doorways watching world's end, felt for one dangerous moment the thing he had trained a lifetime to distrust: hope. "There's a way to know," he said slowly, "how much time we have, and how bad it truly gets. I've been refusing to use it since I arrived, because using it here is dangerous in a way it isn't in my own world." He touched the golden amulet at his throat. "This is the Eye of Agamotto. It lets me look down the branches of the future, not one future, all of them, or as many as I can hold before it burns through me. In my world, magic feeds it. Here, there's no magic in the air to draw on. Every second I hold it open, it eats my own reserve, and I don't get that back. It's the single most expensive thing I could do in this world." He looked from the boy to the frail symbol and back. "But I've been reading the pressure of your future secondhand, like a man feeling for weather in the dark. If I want to know what's actually coming, the shape of it, the timing, the face of the thing wearing your prisoner's power, I have to open the eye and look directly, once, briefly, and it will cost me more than anything has since I crossed over." The room was very quiet. "Then don't," All Might said at once, the protector in him surfacing. "You said yourself you're on a clock you can't wind. If it drains you, if I don't look," Strange said, "we're fighting blind against a thing that's had years to plan, and I've had days to understand. I've done that before. It's how you lose." He was already lifting his hands, already tracing the sign that would wake the eye, the green light beginning to bleed out from under his fingers and pool in the round gold housing at his throat. "Everyone in this room should understand what I'm about to do. I'm going to look at your future, and your future has something in it that eats souls and inherits itself across death, which means when I look at it," he hesitated, half a heartbeat, an old instinct he'd learned to trust and had ignored exactly often enough to nearly die of it. "There's a chance," he finished, quieter, "that it looks back." He opened the eye. The green light unfolded. It spilled out of the amulet and washed the small room in shifting emerald, and time bent around Stephen Strange, like water around a dropped stone. He felt his reserve begin to drain at once, a real, physical sensation, like blood loss, like warmth going out of him through a wound he couldn't close. And he held the eye open anyway and looked. The branches spread before him, thousands of them, tens of thousands. The future of this city, this world, forking and forking into a canopy of possibility, and Strange threw his trained sight up through it, the way he had thrown it up through the branches of 1,000 other dooms, hunting for the shape of the thing, for the timing, for the single thread where it ended well, and the branches were wrong. Not dark. Dark he could have handled. Dark was familiar. These were dark and full. Almost every branch, almost every path, ended the same way, a spreading gray wave that turned cities to dust. A boy screaming at the center of it, and towering over the ruin, a smiling shape, wearing 100 stolen powers like jewels. A face that was young and old at once, an air and an ancient hunger, fused into one, and behind that shape, the whole radiant chain of One for All, going out like a candle, pinched between two fingers. He saw it happen 400 ways. He saw it happen 4,000. He hunted the branches for the one where it didn't, the single thread that was his whole talent. There's always one. And in the depths of the canopy, at the far dark end of every branch, the smiling shape stopped what it was doing. It turned its head, across 10,000 futures at once, in every branch where it stood triumphant over the ashes. The thing that had not yet been born in this timeline lifted its face from its work, and looked up the branches, backward, down time's own current, straight at the point of observation. Straight at him, at the intruder from outside the world, the sorcerer peering in from a doorway that should not exist, the one variable its centuries of planning had never accounted for, and it smiled wider. "I see you," something said without words, in the place behind Strange's eyes where the eye's sight lived. Little sorcerer, little outside thing. You came so far to watch me win. The presence poured up the branches toward the point of observation, like ink up a straw, vast and patient and delighted. A hunger that had waited a century, and had just been handed a new and fascinating flavor. You brought power into my world that I've never tasted. Not a quirk, something older, something I cannot steal, a ripple of something almost like laughter. Yet, stay, please, stay and look a little longer. I so want to get a proper look at you. Strange slammed the eye shut. The green light died. The room came back, the small dorm, the boy, the frail symbol, all of them lunging forward because the Sorcerer Supreme had gone gray to the lips and dropped to one knee on the floor, the cloak flaring around him to catch him, his scarred hands shaking harder than the old injury had ever made them shake. His reserve had a floor now that it hadn't had an hour ago. He could feel exactly how much of himself he had just spent, and it was more than he had planned to spend in the whole of this visit. But that wasn't why his hands were shaking. "Doctor," the boy was saying, gripping his shoulder, and All Might was there too, and Strange lifted his head and looked at the two of them, the frail hero who had given everything, and the boy who was about to be asked to, and for the first time, since he'd fallen through the burning circle, he was afraid, in a way he could not discipline down. "It's not coming," he said hoarsely. They stared at him. That's good, isn't it?" the boy started. "No." Strange got his feet under him, slow, the cloak holding him up, because his own legs wouldn't quite. "You misunderstand. I said, it's not coming." He looked at them both, and made himself say the thing the eye had shown him, the thing that changed the shape of everything he thought he'd crossed the void to stop. "I've been reading this as a future, a thing on its way. Days out, weeks out, something we could see approaching and brace for and get in front of." His voice was very steady now, the way a man's voice goes steady when it has run out of the luxury of being anything else. "It looked back at me just now. It saw me looking. A future doesn't do that. A future can't do that. Only something present can look back." The kettle had stopped ticking. The room was utterly still. "It's already awake," Strange said. "The copy is finished. The air is aware. It's not something coming to your world." He turned his gray face toward the window, toward the lights of Musutafu spread out below, and, somewhere under them, deep beneath the city, behind the very best walls a frightened nation had ever built. "It's already here, and now it knows my name." They moved that night. There was no debating it. Strange had knelt on a dormitory floor and said, "It's already here," and All Might had gone very still, and then very fast. The ruin of the symbol of peace, shedding 40 years of exhaustion in the space of a breath. And within the hour, the machinery of Hero Society was turning over in the dark. Not the public machinery. No press, no rankings, no cameras. The other kind, the quiet kind, the #1 hero and the erasure hero and the winged one, and a handful of others whose names Strange collected and filed, gathered in a gray briefing room while the city slept, being told by a former symbol and a sorcerer from another world that the war they thought they'd won was not over, and that the enemy had already taken the field. They believed it now. The testing was done. The thing Strange had felt looking back up the branches had put a mark on him that even the skeptics could see. He'd gone gray and stayed gray, his hands trembling on the surface of the table. A man who had spent something on their behalf that he could not get back. You do not fake that. The winged hero, who had smiled through everything, was not smiling anymore. The erasure hero, whose entire career was hard countering the impossible, had stopped looking at Strange like a problem to solve, and started looking at him like an ally he was afraid of losing. "The prison," All Might said, and pulled up a map, and the room's attention turned to a facility drawn deep beneath the earth, layer on layer of walls, the deepest cell in the country, Tartarus. "Everything we built to hold him is there. If the air is going for the original, to free him, to fuse with him, to finish becoming whatever he's becoming, that's where it goes. We reinforce Tartarus. We move everything we have to Tartarus. No," Strange said. The room looked at him. "You're guarding the wrong wall." He stood, slowly, the cloak steadying him. I felt him look back at me from the future, from inside the future, from a position of having already won. He wasn't in a prison in those branches. He was standing over the ruins, free, whole, wearing your prisoner's power and your boy's stolen light both. Which means whatever the heir is planning, it does not run through your best cell. It runs around it. He set his scarred hands flat on the map, over the drawn walls, over Tartarus. You built the perfect prison for the man you caught. He built the heir specifically, so that the perfect prison would be irrelevant. You'll pour everything you have into defending the one place the attack was never going to come. And while you're there, the real move happens somewhere you're not looking. Then where? The erasure hero said. Flat. Rationed. The first full sentence Strange had heard him volunteer. And Strange had to say the true thing, the thing he hated saying, the thing his whole discipline was built to never have to say. I don't know. He let it sit. He was too tired and too honest to dress it up. I burned through most of what I had left looking down those branches, and the moment I looked, he felt me and shut the door in my face. I can't open the eye again for some time, maybe longer than we have. If I try, in this world, with what's left in me. He didn't finish. He didn't need to. Every person in the room understood, a man rationing a resource that would not refill. I can feel the two signatures, the original, sealed, the heir, loose. That much I still have. But the heir has stopped moving in a straight line. Ever since it saw me watching, it's gone. He searched for the word, careful. It knows there's an observer in its world now. It knows I brought power here it can't yet steal. So it's changed its plan around me, which is the one genuinely good thing to come of tonight. A thin, grim, almost smile. I've made the enemy nervous. A nervous enemy makes mistakes. I intend to be standing where the mistake happens. The mistake did not come from the enemy. It came from the world. They had been running on the assumption, Strange's assumption, and he would carry it, that the heir would move toward something, toward the prison, toward the boy, toward power. That was how a hunter thought. That was how he thought, and he had let it shape the whole night's planning. So they had fanned out to cover the approaches to Tartarus, and to the boy, and to All Might himself. 3 points a hunter would want. And they had waited in the dark for a thing to come to one of them. The thing did not come to any of them, because the heir's plan had never been to take, not first. All for one, the original, the pattern, the ancient hunger, had built his copy to understand a truth the hunters in the gray room had forgotten under the weight of their own fear, that the surest way to win is not to seize the prize, but to remove everyone who could stop you seizing it, all at once, while they are conveniently gathered in the places you already know they'll be. Strange felt it happen before the alarms did. He was standing on a rooftop near the boys' dormitory, the cloak curled tight against the cold, the drained ache of himself sitting low and heavy behind his ribs, when the two soul signatures he'd been holding in his sight since the moment he arrived, the sealed one and the loose one, moved. Not toward each other, apart, fast, the loose signature, the heir, blazing suddenly bright and turning not toward Tartarus, not toward the boy, but outward, splitting its attention across the whole spread-out map of everywhere the heroes had positioned themselves. Everywhere the strength of this city had gathered itself to defend the wrong wall, and Strange understood, a full and horrible second before it began, exactly what a soul that inherits itself across death had built its heir to do first. It didn't need to break into the prison. It needed to break the people, the ones who'd come running, the ones a nervous, watched enemy had let think they were the hunters, so that they would gather, so that they would concentrate, so that they would put all the strength of hero society in a handful of known places at a known hour. And then it would take them off the board in one motion, and after that, the prison and the boy and the whole radiant chain would simply be there, undefended, waiting, and there would be no one left standing to stop the last inheritance from happening. Strange had made the enemy nervous. The enemy had turned nervousness into a trap, and every move the heroes had made tonight, every reinforcement, every position, every place they'd chosen to stand, because they'd trusted the sorcerer's read of the branches, had walked them into it. "It's not going for the prison," Strange said into the communicator at his collar, and his voice cut across every channel at once, flat and fast and gray. "It's not going for the boy. It's going for all of you. Everyone who came. Everyone we positioned. Get off your marks. Scatter. Do not stay where I told you to." The city's lights went out. Block by block, quarter by quarter, a wave of ordinary darkness rolling across Musutafu from a dozen directions at once, and in the sudden dark, Strange felt the air's signature bloom. Not one point of it now, but many, impossibly many, a single soul that had spent years being seeded with stolen power finally spending it, flowering outward across the whole city toward every gathered defender at once. And he understood the last piece with the awful clarity of a man watching a trap he helped build finish closing. It had let him see the future so that he would help arrange the present. Every branch the eye had shown him, the gray wave, the ruin, the smiling shape. It had wanted him to see all of it. It had smiled at him up the branches, because it had already known that a man who could see the future would try to get in front of it, would gather the world's strength to the obvious points, would do exactly, precisely, faithfully, what a nervous enemy needed the world's protectors to do. Strange had spent the last of his reserve buying a warning, and the warning had been the plan all along. He was already moving, off the rooftop, the cloak snapping him out over the dark city, a sling ring portal tearing open under his outstretched hand, toward the nearest gathered knot of heroes, toward the boys' dormitory, toward anywhere he could put himself between the wave and a life. And he could feel how little he had left to spend, could feel the floor of himself coming up fast, could feel that he had, perhaps, one great working left in him, in a world that would give him nothing back, and then he would be a tired man in a red cloak, and nothing more. Below him, in the dark, the boys' dormitory light was still on, a single warm square in a city going black. Izuku Midoriya, who ran toward the thing that could kill him, awake and afraid, and utterly unaware that every direction was now the wrong direction, and rising up through the dark toward that one warm light, toward the boy, toward the chain, toward the radiant soul that refused to end, came a shape Strange had seen 4,000 times in the branches and had prayed, in the small, unmystical part of himself that still knew how to pray, that he would never see with his own eyes, young and old at once, smiling. It lifted its face toward the descending sorcerer, across the dark, across the closing distance, and Strange felt it recognize him, the outside thing, the flavor it had never tasted, the variable it had turned into a tool, and in the place behind his eyes where the eye's sight still ached, it spoke to him one last time, warm and patient and delighted, as the last of his power gathered in his scarred and shaking hands. "There you are," it said, "right on time. Now, let's find out what you're made of, little sorcerer. I've been so curious." The portal blazed open. Strange fell through the dark toward the light, and every hero in Musutafu, scattered and blind across a city with no power, turned at once toward the same rising scream.